an Apache warrior came begging for milk. She breastfed the baby and became the mother he needed. The morning sun cast long shadows across the wooden porch of the frontier cabin as 28-year-old Catherine Miller sat in her weathered rocking chair, gently nursing her 3-month-old son. Her auburn hair, still tousled from sleep, caught the golden light as she looked down at little Thomas with the tender expression that only mothers knew. The soft gray shawl wrapped around her shoulders provided warmth against the crisp autumn air of the New Mexico territory. Catherine had the kind of face that inspired trust. Warm brown eyes that held both strength and gentleness. Features that spoke of someone who had weathered hardship, but hadn't let it harden her heart. Her simple linen dress was practical rather than fashionable, chosen for comfort and the demands of caring for an infant on the frontier. It had been 6 months since her husband James had died in a logging accident, leaving Catherine to raise their son alone in their isolated cabin. The nearest town was a day's ride away, and her closest neighbors lived miles through the forest. Some days, the loneliness felt almost overwhelming, but Catherine found purpose and strength in caring for Thomas, in maintaining the home James had built for them, and in the quiet hope that somehow they would manage to build a life together. What Catherine didn't know was that she was being watched. For 3 days now, 35-year-old Joseph Running Bear had observed the cabin from the cover of the pine trees that bordered the small clearing. His dark eyes, set in a face marked by both wisdom and sorrow, had taken careful note of the woman's routines, her solitary life, and most importantly, the infant she cared for with such obvious devotion. Joseph was a striking figure, tall and lean with the muscled build of a warrior, his long black hair braided with traditional beads and feathers. A turquoise necklace rested against his chest, and he wore the leather and fringe clothing of his Apache heritage with natural dignity. But it was his eyes that told his story. Eyes that held the weight of loss and desperation that had driven him far from his people's lands. Joseph carried with him a burden that grew heavier with each passing hour. Wrapped in soft duskin and pressed against his chest was his infant daughter, barely 2 months old. The child's mother, Joseph's beloved wife Morning Star, had died in childbirth, and despite Joseph's desperate attempts to care for his daughter, she was slowly starving. Without a nursing mother, and with no other women in his small band who could provide milk, the baby was fading day by day. The other warriors had told Joseph to let the child go, to accept that some lives were too fragile for the harsh realities of their nomadic existence. But Joseph would not abandon his daughter. She was all he had left of Morning Star, and every time he looked into her tiny face, he saw the woman who had been his heart and soul. For weeks, Joseph had tried everything he could think of. He had attempted to feed the baby with thin broths made from game, had begged help from the few Apache women they had encountered in their travels, but none had milk to spare for another woman's child. As his daughter grew weaker, Joseph had made the difficult decision to seek help from the white settlements, despite the tensions between his people and the settlers. From his hiding place in the forest, Joseph had watched Catherine with her son, had seen the abundance of milk that allowed the white woman's child to thrive, while his own daughter slowly wasted away. The irony was not lost on him. Here was a woman of the people his tribe considered enemies. Yet she possessed the one thing that could save his child's life. On this morning, as Joseph watched Catherine nursing her son on the porch, his daughter's weak cries finally broke through his remaining reservations. He could wait no longer. His pride, his warrior's training, his people's mistrust of white settlers, none of it mattered anymore. Only his daughter's life mattered. Joseph emerged from the tree line slowly, his hands visible and empty except for the bundle pressed against his chest. He moved with the careful deliberation of someone approaching a wild animal, understanding that his sudden appearance would likely terrify the isolated woman. Catherine looked up from her son to see a figure approaching across the clearing, and her first instinct was fear. Stories of Apache raids and settler conflicts were common knowledge on the frontier, and the sight of a lone warrior approaching her cabin made her heart race with anxiety. But as Joseph drew closer, Catherine could see something in his posture that wasn't threatening. His approach was slow and non-aggressive, and there was something in his bearing that spoke of desperation rather than hostility. Most tellingly, she could hear the sound that had driven him from the forest, the weak, hungry cries of an infant. Joseph stopped at the edge of the porch, maintaining a respectful distance. Up close, Catherine could see the exhaustion in his face, the way his strong shoulders sagged with worry and sleepless nights. But it was the bundle in his arms that made her breath catch. A tiny baby, clearly malnourished and desperately in need of care. "Please," Joseph said in careful English, the word carrying the weight of a father's love and desperation. "My daughter, she needs." He gestured toward Catherine, toward Thomas, and then back to his own child. The meaning was clear, even without elaborate explanation. This proud warrior was begging for milk for his starving baby. Catherine felt her maternal instincts surge immediately. Whatever tensions existed between their peoples, whatever fears she might have about helping a stranger, all of that faded in the face of a hungry infant. She had milk enough for 2 babies, and the sight of this man's obvious devotion to his child moved something deep in her heart. "Bring her here," Catherine said softly, adjusting Thomas to make room beside her. "Let me see her." Joseph hesitated for a moment, the vulnerability of the situation almost overwhelming. He was placing his most precious possession, his only remaining link to his beloved wife, into the hands of a stranger. But his daughter's needs overcame his fears, and he gently climbed the porch steps and approached Catherine's chair. As Joseph unwrapped the duskin bundle, Catherine got her first clear look at the baby. The infant was beautiful, delicate features that spoke of her Apache heritage, dark eyes that seemed too large for her tiny face, and the unmistakable signs of malnutrition that made Catherine's heart ache with sympathy. "What's her name?" Catherine asked gently, extending her arms to receive the child. "Ayana." Joseph replied, his voice thick with emotion. "It means eternal blossom." Catherine cradled Ayana against her chest, feeling the baby's desperate hunger in the way she immediately turned toward the source of nourishment. "She's beautiful, Joseph. How long has it been since she's eaten properly?" Joseph's composure cracked slightly at the kindness in Catherine's voice. 3 days, maybe 4. Her mother, Morning Star, she died when Ayana was born. "I have tried everything, but..." Catherine didn't need him to finish the explanation. She could see the whole heartbreaking story in his face, in the careful way he watched his daughter, in the desperation that had driven him to seek help from someone his people might consider an enemy. "It's all right," Catherine said firmly, positioning Ayana to nurse alongside Thomas. "We'll take care of her." As Ayana latched on and began to feed with the desperate hunger of a starving infant, Catherine felt a profound shift in her understanding of what family meant. Here was a child who shared none of her blood, whose father came from a different world entirely, but who needed the one thing Catherine could provide: the nourishment that would keep her alive. Joseph watched this miracle unfold with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. For weeks he had watched his daughter grow weaker, had felt helpless in the face of her need. Now, seeing her feed hungrily, seeing the contentment that spread across her tiny face, he felt hope for the first time since Morning Star's death. She was so hungry. He whispered, his voice breaking with relief and gratitude. Catherine looked up at Joseph, seeing past the warrior's exterior to the grieving father underneath. "When did you last eat, or sleep properly?" Joseph's surprise at her concern was evident in his expression. "It doesn't matter. Only Ayana matters. It matters to her," Catherine said firmly. "She needs her father to be strong and healthy." "When did you last have a proper meal?" Joseph couldn't remember. The past weeks had been a blur of desperate travel, frantic searches for help, and nights spent holding his daughter while she cried from hunger. His own needs had become irrelevant in the face of her crisis. Catherine made a decision that would change all their lives. "You'll stay here tonight, both of you. Ayana needs regular feeding to regain her strength, and you need rest and food." But Joseph stared at her in amazement. "You would trust me in your home, with your child?" But Catherine looked down at the 2 babies nursing peacefully side by side, then back at Joseph's grateful face. "Any father who would humble himself to beg for his child's life is someone I can trust. Besides," she added with a small smile, "Thomas could use a friend, and I could use the company." As the day progressed, Catherine learned more about Joseph's story. He told her about Morning Star, how they had met during a peaceful gathering between tribes, how her laughter had lit up his world and her death had nearly destroyed him. He spoke of his people's nomadic life, the challenges of the changing frontier, and the difficult decisions that came with trying to preserve their way of life while adapting to new realities. Catherine, in turn, shared her own story of loss. She told Joseph about James, about their dream for their family, about the loneliness of raising a child alone in the wilderness. She spoke of her fears about the future, her determination to provide for Thomas, and her sometimes overwhelming sense of isolation. Loss is the same in any language. Joseph observed as they sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Both babies slept peacefully in Catherine's arms, their bellies full and their faces content. Yes, Catherine agreed softly, and so is love. Over the following days an unexpected routine developed. Joseph would disappear into the forest at dawn to hunt, returning with fresh game that he shared with Catherine and Thomas. Catherine would care for both babies, nursing Ayanna alongside her own son and marveling at how quickly the Apache child began to thrive with proper nourishment. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, sharing stories and watching their children sleep. Joseph taught Catherine words in his native language, while she helped him improve his English. They discovered that despite their different backgrounds, they shared similar values about family, children, and the importance of kindness in a harsh world. Ayanna grows stronger every day. Catherine observed one evening as she watched the baby girl grasp her finger with tiny but increasingly firm hands. Joseph nodded, his gratitude evident in every line of his face. Because of you, you have given her life. We've given her life, Catherine corrected gently. Your love and determination brought her here. My milk helps her grow. But it's the combination that's making her thrive. As the weeks passed, Catherine found herself thinking less and less about when Joseph and Ayanna would leave. The arrangement that had begun as emergency aid had evolved into something that felt remarkably like family. Thomas seemed to enjoy having another baby around, often reaching out to touch Ayanna's hand when they nursed together. Joseph had become an invaluable partner in managing the practical demands of frontier life, his hunting skills ensuring they had plenty of meat, his knowledge of the land helping Catherine feel more secure in their isolated location. But it was the emotional support that Catherine valued most. After months of carrying all her worries alone, having someone to share the daily challenges and small victories of raising children felt like a blessing she hadn't dared to hope for. Joseph, for his part, was experiencing his own transformation. The desperate, grief-stricken father who had emerged from the forest had gradually been replaced by someone who could envision a future that included more than mere survival. Watching Catherine's gentle care of Ayanna, seeing how naturally she had accepted his daughter as her own, had restored his faith in the possibility of hope and healing. Catherine, Joseph said one evening as they sat together watching the children sleep, I need to ask you something difficult. Catherine felt her heart skip with apprehension. What is it? My people. They will not understand this arrangement. They will see my staying here as betrayal, as choosing the white world over our own. Catherine had been wondering when this conversation would come. And what do you see it as? Joseph was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. I see it as choosing life over death, hope over despair. I see it as finding family in the most unexpected place. But, Catherine prompted, sensing there was more. But if I stay, I cannot go back to my people. And if I go back, I cannot take Ayanna with me. She would not survive without your milk. And even if she did, she would be seen as different, tainted by too much contact with white ways. Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes as she understood the impossible choice Joseph was facing. What do you want to do? Joseph looked at her directly, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart race. I want to stay. I want Ayanna to grow up healthy and strong. I want to be part of the family we've created here, but I don't know if that's fair to ask of you. Catherine reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that felt both natural and revolutionary. Joseph, these past weeks have been the happiest I've known since James died. Not just because of the help you've provided, but because of the companionship, the shared purpose, the way we've learned to care for each other's children as our own. You mean that? Joseph asked, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. I mean it completely. Thomas needs a father figure, and I need a partner in building a life out here. Ayanna needs continued care, and you need a place where you can raise her safely. We've already become a family in every way that matters. Joseph lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to Catherine's fingers. Then we stay. We build something new together. something that honors both our backgrounds while creating something entirely our own. The decision to formalize their partnership came naturally as winter approached. They were married in a simple ceremony that blended elements from both their traditions. Catherine wore a dress of white duskin that Joseph had crafted for her, while Joseph wore a shirt made from cloth Catherine had sewn with traditional Apache patterns she had learned from him. There was no minister or tribal elder to officiate, so they spoke their vows to each other under the vast Montana sky, with their children sleeping peacefully in a shared cradle Joseph had carved from pine wood. "I promise to love and protect your daughter as my own," Catherine said, her voice carrying the weight of sacred commitment. "I promise to love and protect your son as my own," Joseph replied, his words carrying the same solemnity. Together, they added, "We promise to build a home where love matters more than blood, where kindness matters more than tradition, and where our children can grow up understanding that family is defined by choice and commitment rather than by the circumstances of birth." As winter settled over their mountain home, Catherine and Joseph discovered the deep satisfaction that comes from a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They developed routines that honored both their backgrounds, Catherine teaching the children English songs and stories, while Joseph shared Apache legends and traditional skills. Thomas and Ayanna grew up as true siblings, their different heritages becoming sources of pride rather than division. Thomas learned to track animals and read the signs of weather in the sky, while Ayanna learned to sew and cook and manage a frontier household. Both children learned that love came in many forms, that families could be created through choice as well as birth, and that kindness was the highest value their parents held. "Mama Catherine," Ayanna said one day when she was 5 years old, playing with the turquoise beads Joseph had woven into her dark hair, "why do I look different from Thomas?" Catherine, who had been dreading this question, knelt down to Ayanna's level and spoke with the honesty she believed children deserved. "Because you were born to a different mother, sweetheart. A beautiful Apache woman named Morning Star, who loved you so much that when she couldn't take care of you anymore, she made sure your father brought you to someone who could." "So I have two mothers?" Ayanna asked with the matter of fact acceptance that children bring to complex situations. "You have two mothers," Catherine confirmed. "Morning Star gave you life, and I gave you milk to help you grow strong. Both of us love you completely. That makes me extra lucky," Ayanna decided with a smile that lit up her entire face. Joseph, overhearing this conversation from the kitchen, felt his heart swell with gratitude for the woman who had not only saved his daughter's life, but had taught her to see her complex heritage as a blessing rather than a burden. Years later, when their story had become legend in the territory, the Apache warrior and the frontier widow who had created a family through an act of desperate kindness. Visitors would sometimes ask Catherine if she ever regretted her decision to help a stranger's child. "Regret?" Catherine would say, watching as Thomas and Ayanna worked together to tend the horses they now raised on their expanded property. "How can you regret love? How can you regret being part of something bigger than yourself?" She would point to her children. Thomas, now a young man who spoke fluent Apache and English, who could hunt with traditional methods and manage modern farming techniques with equal skill, and Ayanna, a beautiful young woman who combined the grace of her Apache heritage with the practical skills of frontier life, who moved between both worlds with confidence and pride. "Those children taught me that motherhood isn't about biology," Catherine would continue. "It's about commitment, about choosing to love someone completely and permanently. The milk I gave Ayanna was just the beginning. The real nourishment came from treating her as my own daughter every day for years." Joseph, now recognized throughout the territory as a bridge between the Apache people and the white settlers, would add his own perspective. "Catherine saved my daughter's life that first day. But over the years, she saved my life too. She showed me that family isn't about blood or tribe or tradition. It's about people who choose to stand together, to support each other through whatever comes." Their partnership had indeed created something new, a way of living that honored both their heritages while creating space for something unprecedented. Other mixed families in the territory began to look to them as examples of how different cultures could blend successfully, how love could transcend the boundaries that seemed so important to others. "Papa Joseph," Thomas asked one evening as they sat together on the porch where it all began, Do you think Mama Morningstar would be proud of Ayana? The Joseph smiled, looking at his daughter as she helped Catherine prepare dinner, her laughter echoing across the valley they now called home. I think Morningstar would be amazed at the strong, wise, beautiful woman her daughter has become, and I think she would be grateful beyond words to Catherine for making that possible. Catherine, overhearing, came to sit beside Joseph on the bench he had built for their evening conversations. I think she would be proud of you too, she said softly. For having the courage to ask for help when Ayana needed it, for choosing love over pride, life over tradition. We all chose love, Joseph replied, taking Catherine's hand in the gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their years together. And look what love built. As the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their unlikely beginning, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. She had started as a lonely widow, struggling to raise her son alone in the wilderness. A desperate Apache warrior had brought her a starving baby, begging for the milk that would save his daughter's life. What neither of them had expected was that the act of sharing nourishment would create bonds stronger than blood, that caring for each other's children would become the foundation for a love that transcended every boundary their worlds had tried to impose. You know, Catherine said to Joseph as they watched their children, now adults with families of their own, playing with grandchildren who carried the blended heritage of Apache and frontier traditions. I used to think that being alone with Thomas was my destiny, that I would raise him by myself and hope for the best. And now? Joseph asked, though he could see the answer in her contented smile. Now I understand that destiny isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose, day by day, moment by moment. When you brought Ayana to me that morning, I chose to see a hungry baby rather than a stranger's child. You chose to trust me with your most precious gift. Every day since then, we've chosen to build something beautiful together. Joseph nodded, understanding once again why he had fallen in love with this remarkable woman who measured wealth in love given and received rather than in land or possessions accumulated. The morning I emerged from those trees, he said, gesturing toward the forest where he had watched and waited so many years ago, I thought I was begging for my daughter's life. I didn't realize I was also asking for my own life back, and for a future I never could have imagined. Catherine leaned against Joseph's shoulder, feeling the deep contentment that comes from a life well lived and love well shared. That's what mothers do, she said softly. We give life, sometimes through birth, sometimes through milk, sometimes through choice. The how doesn't matter nearly as much as the commitment to keep giving, day after day, year after year. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Catherine thought about the lesson their unconventional family had taught their entire community. That love recognizes no boundaries, that family is created through daily acts of care and commitment, and that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as desperate requests for help. An Apache warrior had come begging for milk, and she had given him a family. In return, he had given her partnership purpose, and the knowledge that kindness multiplied when it was shared freely and without condition. The babies she had nursed side by side on her porch had grown into adults who understood that strength came from helping others, that wealth was measured in relationships rather than possessions, and that the most important traditions were those that brought people together rather than those that held them apart. We did good, Catherine said simply, watching as their legacy played out in the laughter of grandchildren, who would never know a world where love had to choose between different heritages. We did very good, Joseph agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Morningstar would be proud, and so would James. We honored their memory by choosing life, by choosing love, by choosing to build something beautiful from the pieces of what was broken. The mother's heart, Catherine had learned, knows no boundaries. It recognizes need wherever it exists, responds to love however it's offered, and creates family through commitment rather than circumstance. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness. A woman offering milk to a stranger's hungry child, a father humble enough to ask for help, two people brave enough to build something new from the ashes of what they had lost. In the end, the story of Catherine and Joseph became more than just a tale of survival or even love. It became a testament to the truth that families are built by choice, sustained by commitment, and strengthened by the courage to see beyond the differences that seem so important to others. The Apache warrior had begged for milk, and the frontier mother had given him a future. Together, they had created a legacy that would endure for generations. The knowledge that love shared freely becomes love multiplied infinitely, and that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the whispered word, please, and the immediate response, yes.